Welcome to the Amazing Authorities Podcast, where game changers, visionaries, and category leaders share how they built their brands, platforms, and global influence. Your host is Mitch Carson, international speaker, media strategist, and creator of the Instant Authority System. If you're ready to learn from those who've done it and want to become the go-to expert in your space, you're in the right place.
Welcome to another outstanding interview. Today's guest comes all the way. She hails from Singapore. She's traveled and lived all over the world. As a matter of fact, she spent several years in China. Today's guest, with her best-selling book, Building Brands with Soul, is Siew Ting Foo. Great to have you here today, Siew Ting.
Hi, Mitch. Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
nice everyone. Greetings from Singapore.
There you go. There you go. The land of great food. That's what comes to mind for me from Singapore. Great memories and people with good senses of humor. So let's go ahead and dig in. Behind you, I see your book, Building Brands with Soul. You've now become, quite recently, an international bestseller. Quite an achievement for any author, because many of the people who listen are published authors themselves, some of whom are already best-selling authors, some are aspiring, and some have a book idea in their brain and just haven't put it into play yet. So you have written this book. What inspired you to go not only to write it, feel like you deserve to write it, and then the bestseller route we'll talk about in a little bit. But what motivated you?
Well, a couple of things. Well, I have been, over the course of the last 2 years, been writing emails to my team, and I call them the Friday emails. So I started with lots of content. The emails are all about inspiration and driving change. And the second thing is, I have professionally been a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer or marketing leader. There are many, many CMOs out there, but there's not many CMOs with a book. And I wish that, 10 years ago, before I become a CMO, that there could be a book or a playbook that actually shows me the path or shows me the way to become a CMO. So it was with these three reasons that I decided to write a book. And it's also part of my own journey of really paying back to the marketing society, the marketing community, so as to inspire the next generation of marketing leaders.
Well, that's fantastic. You are correct. Very few CMOs will have taken their expertise and applied it to paper. Many will, of course, write motivational letters or emails or maybe just a talk to their teams to keep them up, but to take the next step of writing a book. Now, I read the book and I was fascinated, and you have this high-level multinational background as a brand manager and a brand CMO of all these different brands you've worked for. But can you name a few that you've worked for and projects?
Well, I can. There's 30 global brands at least I've worked on, but I think 5 big multinationals, from the Unilever to the Mars to Diageo alcohol, and then with dairy, Fonterra, and then the last one is actually in tech, HP.
That means you are multidimensional. You have worked in
Kind
various
of.
fields. Yes, I would say that that's different. Mars Corporation, that's food largely, isn't it? Consumable products. Whereas then tech, that's consumable, but intellectually consuming the information versus putting it in our mouth. We're putting that in the brain. Talk about that dynamic, because I don't think I've had anybody on my show that comes from that diverse of a background. Usually people fall into a silo and stay in their lane, so to speak. But those are two distinct silos in the world of marketing.
Well, I think I firmly believe that the craft of marketing is actually applicable across different categories. but the drivers and the motivation of different of categories are different, right? So, if you market food to a mother, to marketing and booze or alcohol to men, the needs and the drivers are fundamentally very different. Being someone that is always very curious, very hungry to learn, I hence, make sure that at every different career journey that I'm making switches that allows me to learn new things, pick up new things, and maybe intentionally or unintentionally, I end up, you know, dabbling into different categories and different industries.
Sure.
But I think it's because of that, it actually helps to make my wealth of experience in marketing and in leadership to become more all well-rounded, or like what you said, multidimensional. Yeah.
Clearly, because I understand, I too, and that's why I was looking forward to having this conversation today, come from a varied marketing background. And I always appreciate people who've been in the trenches and have operated at a high level. You have to start small, you have to crawl before you walk when you get
Yeah.
into the world. And it still fascinates me very much. What is it that you believe? What are all right, let's think about the two circles. Let's go back to basic geometry. I think it was geometry, where you have the circles and then you have the intersection where the two circles, let's say one is consumer goods, or consumables, and then the other is tech. What is
Yeah.
the intersection of psychology that overlaps? What do they both share, and what are the dissimilarities when you market to those very different silos?
I think the similarity is they're both categories are actually answering a human need or human motivation, a human want for a certain occasion, right? So that's consistent, regardless of whether you're in tech or you're not in tech. Having said that, the difference between tech and consumables, consumer goods, is in tech, you don't some of the products and the go-to market is different, right? So for tech, some of it goes directly to consumer, some is actually make access to business to business, which is really through marketing to enterprises, marketing to small medium enterprise, and hence that's the nuance of that is quite different, because the selling motion is different, the product life cycle is different, the buying committee is fundamentally very, very different. The way you go to market, the way you talk, and the contextual drivers of the business to business is very, very different from business to consumer, in that perspective. So I think for me, it is actually a great learning, because I have spent my first 2 decades of my career in consumer goods, whereas the last 6 years I started pivoting into tech, where there is both business to consumer, but there's also business to business, which is a real test of my marketing craft. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. And testing is the operative word. Sales is just when the pins are lined up well by marketing. And then your order taking, you may have to push people over the edge. But to get them to the point of raising their hand saying, I'm interested, that's the job of the marketeer.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is people ask me, I work as a publicist here in Las Vegas. I have a show on NBC TV. And people ask me, well, how do I get on TV? I said, remember the most important aspect of getting you booked. It's not if your story is interesting, it is, but that isn't the first level that you have, or the first screen you must pass. But so let's look at the booking agent, the person largely female, and I'm making a gender-based bias here because that's been my experience. Usually the female or a woman is the one that filters in what guests will get on what shows. She's the first filter. And then the producers are largely, here in Las Vegas specifically, the 5 networks I work with, it's largely a female driven job today. This is what I've experienced here. I don't know why it works out. I don't know what, that's a different conversation, but it does. So the first thing, let's call her Peggy Jones. Peggy Jones, who's the booking agent who aspires to be a producer one day, then to be a station manager. That's the ascension model inside a TV studio. Her primary job is to save her job. Her primary motivation, excuse me, her primary motivation is to save her job. It's not to have necessarily the best guess that she can then present to the producer to say yes or no. But she's got to vet this person because she's worried about feeding her 2 kids at home because of the long hours. She is worried about keeping her job at the end of the week, high pressure, high stress environment. So it's not, is this the best guess, is will this person embarrass me? Will I keep my job? So, and then secondary concern is, okay, how do I pitch this to the producer? Because there are levels. So how do you address that? I'm presenting you almost a challenge. So if as a marketing officer, we didn't plan for this. That's why I said we'll just go organically. What is a way that you might see? And excuse me for putting you in the frying pan, but this is a way to show, I know you can answer this. How do you get past the initial screen of Peggy Jones? I'm just giving her a name. Peggy Jones, who's the booking agent before she submits to Teresa Thomas, who's now the producer, who then has yeah.
Well, real test, I didn't quite expect this to be really frank, but I guess it goes back to what you articulated in terms of Peggy Jones' motivation. So
Sure.
I think she potentially wants to give the best option with the least incidents to fail. And then you almost want to make it in a way that is so simple for her to present it to the producer. So if I were you, I would create a very compelling, maybe no more than 3 points story of this person that you want to prospect to, maybe highly visual, and catch her attention, maybe with a headline that really makes this person really stand out and catch her attention. And then the package is so simple for her. There's a picture of the person, there is the headline of the person, there's a tree selling part of the person, so that it makes her job so easy and compelling for her to pitch it to her boss or the producer. So that will basically, meet her needs, because you're making it really simple. You're giving her a great package. She's not going to lose her job after that, and then she's going to impress the boss.
And I brought it granular for a reason. I didn't know that we were going to go there, but it came up to mind. And like I said, the flow of thus. Now let's take it to, that's very small, localized. And yes, that's the formula. You laid out perfectly. I tested your high level expertise. Psychology is psychology. You just talked about psychology, taking away the pain, and then the strategy to get there. Using visuals, highly visual, and make it to where it's almost a no-brainer. You said easy, which is the antithesis of difficult, hurdles and hard work. So they want the easy path, someone that's well packaged. When you were working in, let's just say your last big CMO position, what's the pitch dynamic there?
It's complex. It's potentially 10 different Peggy Jones of different culture, functions, skill set, and we would call it in a very nice term, multi-stakeholder.
Sure.
In that perspective, you will also be recommending strategies that is not only answering one target audience, which is the customer. You're also needing to make sure that it answers to your shareholders, your stakeholders, your employees, and blah, 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 right? So in order to do that, it really, my own personal formula is, it goes back to the root and heart of what marketing is all about, which is you understand human psychology. So what
Correct.
is the insight that you're answering? And especially in a global organization, what is a global universal human truth that you're answering at a global level? And when you sell your value proposition to multi-stakeholder, understanding the different agendas, and potentially you actually do pre-alignment first. You don't go straight in and and get yourself killed. You do pre-alignment around that perspective. So that's more on the global level. Once the strategy is aligned and it goes into execution, when it gets down to the market, it becomes more granular, meaning when you go to the market, it's about local execution. And what do I mean by that? Global insight, global positioning, but local expression and local execution that is culturally relevant. So, for example, a brand that I used to work on that I'm passionate about, Johnny Walker, fantastic global brand, consistent look and feel, same positioning, tagline, keep walking. But when it goes down to the market, the advertising that comes across may be slightly different in the Thailand versus China versus Brazil. So that's the complexity that I have to deal with, and the ability to know when to zoom out and zoom down and zoom in becomes very critical.
Yeah, many more factors tie into making decisions when you roll out these marketing initiatives, it sounds like. When you go global or multinational, it's what you identified. The first example I gave, and you answered that well. That was much more granular, local, fast, very basic. Package it visually, understand some psychology, and who's going to execute and make it easy.
Yeah.
More involved. And it's interesting when you talk about big global brands. There was a case study that has stuck out in my mind for years. When I was in grad school, I have one of those annoying degrees called MBA. And one of the great case studies was, and this is where you mentioned local versus global, and Johnny Walker at the congruency. There was a brand with Chevrolet, the car manufacturer. It's a big in the US, called Innova. Now, Innova in English that we speak natively is something in the constellation. I believe it's a type of sun or related to the sky and or astronomy. It's astronomical. Oh, a nova. She's a nova, or that's a nova up there. We think of the sky and it's beautiful and it's red, so they called it the nova. Now, nova, and my second language is Spanish, Siew Ting. So nova, spelled Nova, means it doesn't go.
In Spanish.
In Spanish. So when they rolled out the Nova brand in Latin America, how well do you think it did for a car that has to move when the brand says Nova? It doesn't move. Yeah, I think the brand manager or for international marketing lost his or her job under that big mess up. And
right.
Yeah, so how do you, as a high-level brand manager and CMO, how would you vet that type of situation when it gets into, there's the case study that's, they didn't ask or involve local advice. They just, it's the Nova, that's what it comes from the sky, and that's corporate. The CEO wants it, and that's it. We're doing it, as opposed to finding out or anticipate a major flop like that, when you get into language.
No, I think due diligence is really important, and also a core respect of diversity, of differences, and empathy to differences becomes really important, especially in the context of marketing. It's cultural. It's because you're answering human needs. So the cultural expression and having an empathy to understand the cultural nuances becomes really important, right? So I'm a firm believer, having sat in global, local, region roles, you can't operate a global brand from the ivory tower. You need to flatten the communication hierarchy. In fact, I operate more as a global marketing leader that operates in the community. What do I mean by that? I make sure that when I actually want to reposition the brand, for example, global brand, I make sure that within the community that develops the brand has diverse representation from different markets and different regions, and I have to win their hearts. Job is on me to really win their hearts, to bring out the best on actually answering a customer needs and actually serving the brand in itself. So in the nutshell, operating in communities, appreciation of diversity and differences in the cultural nuances, and actually having checks and balance in the developmental process to make sure that you really do the test. Because one ad that might looks amazingly in the US might flop in Asia just because of some very simple nuances of what you mentioned, or even the context of humor that is
Sure.
very, very different, right? Like humor
Big
in the
fact.
US and humor in the Australia and humor in Asia is miles apart. So having that test, like the right discipline and checks in between, is really critical.
Yeah, and maybe bringing in local individuals. Would you
Yes.
consult with somebody? For example, I recently ran an event before we met, an author showcase. It was an author virtual event of 2 days, me showcasing many of the authors I trained how to write their books and get it out there. And the copy was not converting on the landing page like I wanted from Facebook ads. So I invited a Malaysian with a lot of experience writing ad copy on a local basis for the Singapore market, and we bumped conversions up 17% because he used, I don't even know the dialect. I'm not from there, but you know that as a Singaporean, there are words that you might use that no way would an American know without the exposure to the market. So do you exact that type of strategy when you market on a local basis?
Totally. In fact, like I said, when you do a global brand, you need to have local representation in the process, in the development, and you need to give them empowerment, especially in the expression of the execution, to the local team.
Yeah, well, that makes a big difference. So what are some of the great takeaways from your book? I mean, we got a lot that we covered. I
Sure.
see you're a bright woman, certainly know what's going on a global basis, on a high level, and then you've also got the experience and know-how of what it takes for it to work in separate sectors in the marketplace. What's covered in the book?
Well, this is not your marketing 101 or teaching you marketing principles and frameworks.
Sure.
There's lots of other people who writes about it who are more established than me. This is more a story about my own personal journey of becoming a CMO, and the title is called Building Brands with Soul, SOUL. It's very intentional why I chose the word soul. There's a couple of takeaways that you can get from the book. One, you will really understand what does building a brand with soul, what means, what are the criteria, and what are the pillars, and what does it take to build a brand with soul. Second, it's indirectly written in a way that I actually share my own philosophies on how to lead and build organizations globally and regionally and locally around the world with my own principle of leadership, and I call it leadership with soul or human-centric approach. And then the third thing is just some of my own tips and learnings and failures and battle wounds of my own journey of becoming a leader, and also becoming a CMO, so that it helps to become a little bit of a playbook for aspiring marketing leaders as they stepped into their next role or their next career or the aspiration to become a CMO.
Great. And I happen to read through it, and I love the high level perspective and different examples which are covered inside. your book. Very well written, and it's academic with real world experience, much more so than reading something by William Kotler, who's the biggest marketing book for university level consumption. He's that's who I read when I was in college, and then later when I was in grad school, everything was William H. Kotler. I don't know if that's what you studied in Singapore, if that rings a bell at all.
Philip Kotler.
Oh, Philip Kotler.
Philip Kotler.
Philip
Yes.
Kotler. That's right. I just knew the last. Thank you for that correction. You are the CMO, Philip Kotler. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. What name did I come up with? Maybe that was his brother. I don't know. But it was Kotler. Yes. That was for the academic boat.
Correct.
All right. So then you've got this book that came out. When did you publish it? And what should people take away through this when they consume your book? What will be the next step for them?
Well, I think that I published it in end November last year.
Yep.
So it's just a couple of slightly more than 3 months. I wish to have more people to read about the book, so they spread the message. One of the reasons that I wrote the book, which is summed up in the visual, if you look at the book, there's this
right there.
Ripple here.
Uh-huh.
So this is an important one. It is written in one paragraph in the book. I call this the ripple effect.
Oh.
I believe that by leading with soul, it starts from first self, managing yourself, knowing your purpose, knowing who you are, knowing what are your areas of derailers. By managing yourself well as a leader, then you can manage your team. And then you can actually manage a great brand, and then you can impact the business. So for me, the book somehow intentionally and unintentionally talks through my own journey of how I manage myself, how I found my purpose, how I built brands and built business and brands and teams in that journey. So I'm hoping this book starts creating a ripple effect across the marketing community, and help people with, what they do, so that it inspire more brands, great brands with soul, and great leaders with soul, which I think the world in its current state needs that quite a fair bit.
Yes, we've got quite a bit of branding on a worldwide basis that's being challenged right now with our administration. And that's the way I'll keep it politically correct, because I don't want those guys with the dark sunglasses knocking on my door later. Saying, come with us. And I was saying, yeah, wow. A lot of interesting information. I love this intellectual banter of discussing marketing, because this has been my passion for my professional career. I don't have the high level global. I've been much more down in the trenches. So there are so many disciplines inside the whole umbrella of marketing. Yeah. And you've expressed that very well. So they can go and get your book through the QR code that's behind you, and it's available on Amazon.com. They can buy it through Amazon in your native Singapore, which is also. And then is this your book site behind us?
Yes, you can also look at check me out, or check the book out at www.soulforprofit.org.
Soulforprofit.org.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. Siew Ting, been a pleasure to have you on the show. Sorry that we went a little over the allocated time, but I found this interesting, and I think our listeners will be more interested in you, having listened to you share your expertise. Masterful marketer in your background, and I look forward to doing this again in the future. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Amazing Authorities Podcast. If today's episode inspired you, take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more experts like you rise to the top. For behind-the-scenes access and free resources to boost your authority, head to MitchCarson.com. Until next time, stay amazing.